Hi, everybody. You're watching a special election edition of the Orchard Cast. Each week of the Canadian federal election, I've been joined by a different guest to discuss key issues and developments in the campaign. Election episodes of this podcast have been free for anyone who wants to listen. But if you like the work I do and want to hear full episodes of the regular Orchard Cast, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. This week, we've got Nora Loreto on the show. Nora is a fellow independent journalist and author. Her latest book, Corporate Control, the second part of her series on Canadian decline, comes out May 6th. Nora, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Aren't you glad this campaign is just about over?
I have not been so happy for a campaign to end as much as I am for this one to be over.
Has this been the most annoying election of your adult life?
I mean, I think that humans have a propensity to forget how annoying things are. And so it's hard to say that this is the most annoying, but it has definitely been very irritating. And I certainly felt very good about advanced voting so that I could just wash my hands of it and be like, whatever. And I'm advanced voting, not because I wanted to wash my hands of it, but I am in Toronto for the day, so I couldn't have voted if I hadn't voted in advance.
Nice. What riding are you?
I'm in Quebec Centre or Quebec Centre.
Right. Is that a liberal riding typically?
It's not typically a liberal riding, but it has been since 2015. And our representative is Jean-Yves Duclos, who's one of the heavier hitters among the cabinet table with Trudeau.
Oh, yeah. I know that guy.
Yeah. And I keep running into him. I think I've saw him like 5 times in the last week.
Yeah. Well, before we get into our topics of discussion, I just want to give a quick polling update. According to CBC Poll Tracker, the polls have tightened a bit since last week. The Liberals have 43%. Conservatives have 39%. The NDP is at 8%. The Bloc Québécois has 6%. Greens have 2%. And the PP Party has 1%. Now, let's get to it. In Hamilton on Wednesday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre announced plans to give police more power to dismantle homeless encampments. For those trapped in these camps, he said, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our neighbors, they're left to suffer in the cold, to overdose, and sometimes to die alone. Letting these tent cities spread is not compassion, it is chaos. This is an interesting way to frame his policy, which would create a new criminal offense for blocking public spaces with tents or other temporary shelters. He would give the police power to criminally charge residents of tent encampments, but Poilievre said judges could impose mandatory drug treatment instead of harsher punishments. This policy seems like me to be a way to criminalize both homeless and pro-Palestine encampments in one fell swoop, because he's talking about blocking public spaces. University of Victoria law professor Esther Van Wagner told the Canadian press that it's already illegal to obstruct people in a public space. There's no gap here they would be filling, she said, referring to the policy as performative. Now, I suspect it's more than just performative. Given that obstructing public spaces is already illegal, what ulterior motive does Poilievre's policy serve more?
I mean, he just wants to clear people out of public spaces. He wants to beef up his fighting crime, his crime and punishment agenda. This combined with, forced treatment for anyone who has any addiction issues is just like mind-blowingly cruel. And he's tapping into the fact that Canadians are seeing the impact of the decline that is triggered when the social safety net falls apart. And rather than actually attacking any of the root causes, he's like, you know what, we're just going to criminalize the people who are already marginalized. And that is completely in line with what they have been approaching public policy with. It's the same lens. It's like crime and punishment and policing and removals and disappearing people. And it's it's disgusting. And sadly, there isn't a strong enough left flank to clearly articulate why all of this is doing the exact opposite of what he pretends it's doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a story that made a big splash earlier this week. The Conservatives had to republish their official platform in
Mm-hmm.
English because the original didn't include a pledge to combat so called woke ideology in the civil service and university research. This promise did make its way into the French version of the national conservative platform, as
Mm-hmm.
well as both languages of its Quebec platform. A party spokesperson told the CBC that its exclusion from the full English platform was just an oversight. And I believe that. Do you?
I think like saying it's an oversight ignores the fact that this is an issue that plays in Quebec that doesn't play in the same way in the rest of Canada. And so oversight or not, it's because they are focusing very much on how this idea of wokeism in Quebec has been it's a very easy way to appeal to traditional conservative voters in that province, and it actually means anything that the conservatives want it to mean. So it's a really effective rhetorical frame. I think that in French, I mean, the break in understanding what happened, like American politics or American left wing politics, especially because I mean, Quebecers are obsessed with what's going on with Trump. Um, but like in English Canada, there's more of an ability to challenge like the whole idea of wokeism and how this is really just a new way of talking about white supremacy. That hasn't translated to Quebec, and so I think wokeism is like it works a little bit better in Quebec, and which would be very much why it wouldn't be on the front of everyone's mind to make sure that that's in the English Canadian version of the platform. But it wasn't just wokeism. There was another piece, I believe, that was left out of the English platform, which was related to the Quebec City Tramway. And so again, you can see that they're adding on pieces. Those two issues go hand in hand, and they're adding on these pieces to make sure that they're nailing a very specific kind of voter that lives outside of the Quebec City region, that are trying to make sure that they're afraid of Montreal, that they're afraid of public transit, and that they absolutely will hang on to their cars, and they won't be taken away unless it's from their cold, dead hands.
Right. That public transit is woke.
Yeah, well, public transit is woke. Anybody that wants to reduce traffic congestion is woke. Like, it's really it's really astounding that it's one of these frames, as I said, that can be used to say anything. And the Quebec Conservative Party, which is like mostly a joke, they look closer to the PPC than the Conservatives in the province. They have really been pushing that really, really hard. And so you can see that there's strategists that are coming from the Quebec Conservative Party and people like Eric Duhem trying to see if this kind of politic will play in the rest of Canada. And it's like, it's not even clear that it'll play in the rest of Quebec because the Conservative Party can't get elected anywhere in the province. And it will be hard, especially with the CAQ being basically a Conservative Party. And so are the Liberals, actually. So yeah, so oversight or not, it's more of a statement of the two solitudes, actually.
Right. And what is the centrality of combating le wokeism to Poilievre's style of politics say about it?
Well, I mean, he's banking on the real Québécois de souche, these like white Quebecers who have absolutely no connection with like the cities, because Quebec is still very regional, right? Like, it's not. It's actually more regional than the rest of Canada, where people don't really have interaction with the major city centers in the same way that you might in any small town in the rest of Canada. Although, of course, there's a lot of similarities as well. And Poilievre is trying to use this to piggyback over the fact that he has no actual policy in Quebec. He has no actual policy in the rest of Canada either, but the anti-tax stuff doesn't work as well in Quebec. The social conservative stuff doesn't work at all in Quebec. And so he doesn't have shortcuts that he has in the rest of Canada to be like, you have no choice but to vote for us, especially with the Bloc Québécois. And the Bloc is interesting because they're a social democratic party, but but they can appeal to people that also would vote conservative, probably looking at more like that red Tory streak, and so that means that Poilievre needs to have a Quebec strategy, and he does have a Quebec strategy, but the whole wokeism is a way to leapfrog past any sticky policy issues. And I don't know if you caught the French language debate, but he made it clear, for example, that he is not talking about abortion. He's not opening up the abortion discussion. This was like not my issue. And that you have to say that to get Quebecers to support a Conservative Party.
Right. Now, I want to go to the Liberal side of the ledger. In March, Mark Carney spoke to U.S. President Donald Trump for the first time over the phone. At the time, Carney said Trump, quote, respected Canada's sovereignty today, both in his private and public comments. On Thursday, we learned via Radio Canada that Trump reiterated his threat in that phone call to make Canada the 51st state. The report cited anonymous sources. I can't think of a scenario in which those sources are from Carney's team. In response to Radio Canada's inquiries, Carney tried to thread the needle, claiming that, yes, Trump mentioned annexing Canada, but he also respected Canadian sovereignty. Trump, after all, says a lot of things, Carney observed, which
is true.
True. Can't argue with that.
No.
Trump's threats, more than Carney's leadership style itself, has been the main contribution towards the remarkable reversal of the Liberals and Conservatives' fortunes, I think, is the conventional wisdom about this election, and I think it's correct. To what extent do you think Carney, knowing this, has exaggerated the immediacy of the threat the U.S. poses to Canadian sovereignty for electoral gain?
That's a hard question to answer, because I think that I sit here and watch this and I'm like, this is stupid. Like, what, they're going to annex Canada? Like, it's obviously not going to happen and it's stupid. But there are a lot of Canadians that do believe that it's a possibility and that we need to take it seriously. And whether or not Carney thinks it's a real possibility, or if he's doing this stuff cynically, kind of doesn't matter, because a lot of Canadians do care about it and they do feel like they're anxious that this could happen. Certainly, I think that if the syrupy flag waving nationalism wasn't going to make huge strides for Carney, in the same way that wokeism is allowing Poilievre to leapfrog over certain issues, this is allowing Carney to leapfrog over the legacy of Justin Trudeau. Perhaps they wouldn't lean as much into it, but the reality is that Trump is completely erratic. We've lived through a Trump presidency already. Trudeau managed that actually very well, in the most normative ways that we would say that someone has managed something very well. And I think that Canadians don't want to see a Canadian prime minister who actually does believe what Trump believes. Like, at the end of the day, Canadians are we do love compromise and middle of the road and wishy-washy and this kind of thing. And I think that it scares a lot of people to imagine having a Trump and a Poilievre in power at the same time, because Poilievre obviously couldn't stand up to Trump in the way that Mark Carney can. And I think that whether or not they leaned further into that issue to try and get more support kind of doesn't matter, because it was going to help the Liberals no matter what. There's no way that Poilievre can make anything out of that, because he's so implicated in Trumpism, in Trump-style politics.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable seeing Poilievre try and squirm his way out of this and being like, no, we're going to stand up to Trump by cutting taxes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
How? What does that do? What are you talking about? And then also military
it's like,
stuff.
Well, he did for Canadian-made cars, we're going to cut the GST off them. So it's like, great, your Canadian-made car is going to be 5% cheaper.
But there is no such thing as a Canadian. I mean, the other thing, a car crosses the border 17 times or something before it's built. None of these companies are Canadian. What are you even talking about?
Yeah, it's not like Canada has an auto industry that isn't completely tied to the United States. Another thing that conservatives have been hammering on is that interview Trump gave where he said that Pierre Poilievre isn't MAGA, and he doesn't want him to win. He's like, see, he wants Mark Carney to win because he knows he's weak.
Right.
And
yeah,
I mean, watch the interview. Trump's not saying that he's saying he doesn't care who wins.
Right.
Which I think is true. Why would he care?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing about Danielle Smith's interventions in efforts to convince the United States that they should lay off the tariffs until
Yeah.
Polyev gets in power. It's like, what do they care? What does it matter to them?
They don't care. They don't care about you at all.
Yeah. We are an appendage of them. Like it doesn't matter who, and it doesn't matter
No.
who wins this election, whether it's Carney or Polyev, because we are dependent on the United States, and unless we want to go all in on China and risk becoming Ukraine to America, then we're kind of stuck.
Yeah, we're kind of stuck. So, and this is the thing too, is it's like the idea that like Trump is a pure nationalist. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about who leads Canada. He's going to deal with what he does regardless. And then the idea from the conservatives that Trump wants Carney to win because he's the weak one of the two is like a real misfiring on understanding how Canadians even see Poilievre. Because I don't think anyone, even their supporters, think that he's like a tough guy. Like all your lifting hasn't made you a tough guy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's literally just people on Twitter with like the Apple emoji because they're still so excited about that video from like at least a year ago, if not 2 years ago, of Pierre Poilievre yelling at that journalist while eating an apple.
What a goofy bunch of garbage.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the silver linings. I mean, we can perhaps talk about the decimation of the NDP in a bit. I don't think that's a positive development, as many critiques as I have of the NDP. But seeing that little weasel have to eat absolute shit tonight, hopefully, probably, is going to be great.
It's going to be great.
Now, public sector unions are weighing in on Poilievre and Carney's stated commitments to reducing the size of the public sector. It's in both parties' platforms. CBC story from Wednesday notes that the Public Sector Commission of Canada last year reported that the size of the public sector has reached a record high. Left unsaid is the fact that Canada's population has also
record high.
Yeah, which seems to me like a pretty major oversight. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah. Anytime you have anti-public sector sentiment, it's always rooted in this idea that the state is too big and blah, blah, blah. And of course, things can always be made more efficient, and we're not actually doing that. And you can listen to the unions to hear all of the ways that things are being made inefficient. But it's like the idea that in a moment where we're being threatened by the United States, where we need a national economic policy, you're going to start also firing people with good jobs. Where are they going to go? What jobs are they going to get? Who's going to do those services? We have backlogs basically in every service provider, pretty much across the public sector. What's going to happen to those backlogs? Like, I don't know about you, but I want to see the size of all of the infrastructure, supporting justice, not prisons, but like the court systems. I want to see that massively increased because we have huge backlogs there. And that of course takes provincial and federal cooperation. It's just like all we can talk about is in these like most basic and boring possible ways in explaining things. And it's like the lack of imagination is irritating, and I hate it. And it's like, can we please talk about something else? Like, can we please talk about something real, right? Oh, shrink the size of public service. Whoa, wow. Where'd you come up with that? 1995? Like,
yeah.
Great.
I mean, obviously you expect that at this point from conservative leader. I mean, that's what Harper did.
Yeah.
But it seems like Carney is getting a total free pass from a lot of progressives who might otherwise be voting NDP or Bloc. Quebec,
Mm-hmm.
for almost explicitly advocating a return to the austerity of the 1990s,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with spending on while continuing to spend on like capital projects that businesses benefit from.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's tough because Trump has shifted the conversation to not really create any space for us to have to have conversations about what needs to happen. Like Carney is going to become prime minister, let's say, and he's going to be right back where we were with Trudeau in like mid-November. And it's going to be a disaster, and it's going to be hostile, and he's going to do belt tightening and all of these like austere measures that are going to make the problem worse. And without a left flank, like there's not a whole lot that's going to stop him.
Yeah, and I also sense that Carney's going to get very unpopular very quickly once the actual impacts of the tariffs are felt, and
Yeah,
that just
totally.
happens. The incumbent is going to get blamed, and it'll be interesting to see who the conservatives select as their next leader. Like a hologram of I don't know, Heinrich Himmler, or
That's the
I'm
direction
just
we're
trying to
heading.
think of someone that's to the right of Pierre Poilievre, and
Right. The
he's to the
ghost of
right.
Adrian Arcand.
That's right. Yeah, more Canadian reference. But regarding this sort of mania for shrinking the size of the public sector that the CBC, which is part of the public sector, is manufacturing consent for. In the
Mm-hmm.
story, Nathan Pryor of the Canadian Association of Professional Employees, which represents 25,000 workers at the Treasury Board, the Library of Parliament, and PBO, likened both parties' platforms to Elon Musk's Doge in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which, if listeners need a reminder, is the department, well, not really a department, even though it's called the Department of Government Efficiency. It's sort of this arm's length body, supposedly, in which Musk is just going from department to department and just laying people off and trying to reduce government spending as much as possible, except on contracts for himself and Israel.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Um, yeah. So that's what Pryor is referring to. He said the conservatives are offering Doge and the liberals are offering what he called Doge Light. He
Mm-hmm.
said
Mm-hmm.
that the parties are both in different configurations, promising to, quote, somehow magically reduce the size of the public sector, unquote, while somehow maintaining or expanding existing social programs. Remember, if you recall, Poilievre has said he's not going to roll back dental care or $10 a day daycare or pharmacare, and Carney says that he is going to build on these things.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Silas, the national executive VP at the Public Service Alliance of Canada, which represents almost 200,000 federal government workers, said the next government needs to be reinforcing the public sector, not cutting it. Now, Nora, as someone who's quite immersed in labor politics in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
you, of course, are with the Canadian Association of Labor Media, in addition to the other hats you wear. How do you suggest unions address the inevitable deluge of cuts that are going to happen, whether the liberals or conservatives win?
I think that there's a real crisis within the labor movement of actually reaching the membership right now. And I mean, you quoted two labor leaders, Alex and Nate, who are standing out as doing politics a bit differently, as really trying to engage the members. They're doing really impressive work. But by and large, we're not engaging with union members. It's hard to see if any of like the election advertisements have really shifted any of the kind of consciousness or opinions of union members in Canada, which poses a really big crisis of legitimacy for labor. And when you have a crisis of legitimacy, especially, I mean, that crisis of legitimacy is probably no more extreme than at the level of the CLC. I mean, like, no one thinks the CLC is going to organize a general strike tomorrow. No one thinks that they could probably even organize 500 people at Parliament Hill tomorrow, which is a real disaster. And the Liberals are going to operate knowing that they are more ineffective than they've been for a long, long, long time. That's a disaster, because we need to have a labor movement that is strong, that is threatening, that is able to shut things down when things need to be shut down. And instead, the labor movement has really gone towards the path of supporting liberal policy, literally being on stage with liberals in some cases. And it's like lobbying, like seeing the labor movement as a lobbying force is a dead end. But a lot of leadership within labor does see it as that. And the reason why they're not lobbyists is because the entire economy is being held up by working people, and a non-insignificant chunk of working people are unionized. So it's like, I mean, we have to restore power at the most basic level to average working people, to union members, to actually take radical action and to fight back, because without that, they're not going to be afraid. And like, Carney's a really good example of someone who all of his environmental work was being led because there was global pressure to do better for the environment. And the second that those kinds of winds shifted, we saw a pullback of doing, good things for the environment. So this is a guy that's going to need to be pushed, and unions have to play a key role in that. And it's a little bit despairing because, with the exception of a couple of bright spots on the map, I mean, it's not good. It's not looking good for labor right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here in Alberta, actually, the Alberta Federation of Labor just had its policy convention, and Gil McGowan has continuing his reign, winning an 11th term, which some people are calling the Gillennium.
I saw that, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Gil's approach has been essentially to hold these big rallies and be in the media a lot, making statements. But his opponent, who I interviewed recently, Greg Mady, who's like a postal worker, is the president of the Edmonton District Labor Council, saying we need to like be on shop floors. We need to be engaging with like union membership and not just, like speaking mainly in the media, right? And he was defeated soundly. So yeah, and I mean, of course, the AFL isn't a union, right? It's a sort of a
federation.
Yeah, a federation of unions, and they've got this common front agenda that they're doing, where they've brought in a bunch of unions that aren't part of the AFL, like Alberta's biggest union, the Union of Public Employees, which is now part of this, in like Unifor. But it's unclear what exactly they're going to do. In fact, I asked Gil at a press conference he hosted announcing this, and he was pretty much like, I can't tell you. This is a high stakes game, and I can't show my cards.
Right.
Like, well, why do you call it a press conference? But it just reminds me of these really deep seated issues the Canadian labor movement is facing right now, as a literal banker is about to become prime minister who does not care about working people at all. And, seems to be getting a free pass for not caring about working people.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's going to take a lot to rebuild. And Alberta is a really interesting place because Danielle Smith is the most extreme premier and will elicit more radical action than perhaps people are used to seeing in the province. And so that's really positive. It is also very positive that the AFL has created this common front, because bringing people in to the same room when they're not necessarily members of the CLC is really, really important. But as you say, not knowing to what end is it's a big question. You know, the Quebec Common Front has been around now for 54 years, and it collectively bargains. It bargains across the sector. And because they have that kind of power, they're able to shut things down, and their strikes are a big deal. But that also comes out of a very radical moment in Quebec history, where the sovereignty movement was at its peak, really, at its most militant. And it's hard to imagine what that looks like in the rest of Canada. Though, I mean, Christ, we're also at a point where it's like, try anything. This is great. Whatever. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, also, Danielle Smith, thus far, has been very restrained when it comes to the public sector and organized labor, compared with Jason Kenney, which you wouldn't normally expect. That's probably because oil prices have been quite high the past few years.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, but even having the Common Front in and of itself is a little bit frightening. You don't want to pick a fight with like a giant group, right? Even if it's fronting, even if Gill's strategy is to just look like they're big. It is a strategy. I mean, that does play into it. And then Danielle Smith, I mean, Christ, she's also, like every other conservative in Canada, is watching how the polyever experiment plays itself out. And I'm sure that there's vultures that are willing, like, just circling around her, ready to like take her down if they think that she's being too like wackadoodle, which is her, her MO.
Well, I don't think so, actually, because if you look at what the party membership wants, they want her to go further, right? So, and that was the problem with Kenney, right? Was that they regarded him as being all talk,
right?
No action. So I don't think Smith risks getting deposed by the party membership for being too wackadoodle. And
no, but it's not the party membership that matters. It's the voters,
right.
And so
But
that'll be that interesting dance between the radicals within the party and like average people.
Yeah, I think because what happened in 2023 was that essentially, there was all this, Alberta First, Alberta Sovereignty Act stuff, culture war things like, forced recovery for people who use drugs, and just sending more cops to Calgary and Edmonton downtown. But for suburban voters in Calgary who might have been uncomfortable with all the culture war stuff, it was just like, hey, I'm going to cut your taxes. And, that got her enough seats to put her across the finish line. Although the NDP did win Calgary, the popular vote and the seat count for the first time ever in its history. And they were boasting about how they're the biggest official opposition in Alberta history, which is some unbelievable losership. You wrote an interesting piece a few weeks ago on your Substack, headline, "Stop Lying to Yourself About Strategic Voting." In the piece, you write, "Strategic voting is the Liberals' silver bullet. It compresses the entire election, from defense spending to hypocrisy, from population decline to healthcare, from Islamophobia to tariffs, from Trump to Gaza, into a single question. Do you want the Conservatives to win?" Well, this has been massaged into being a reasonable way to interact with democracy. In reality, it's a clever flattening of democratic participation that erases everything that matters and instead gives you a simple choice to make: blue or no. In my writing, Edmonton Griesbach, NDP incumbent Blake Desjardins is telling Liberal voters to vote for him to defeat Conservative candidate Kerry Diod. So he's sort of turning the tables, I guess, on the strategic voting argument. And it's interesting to see Liberals who are going around the rest of the city demanding people who want to vote New Democrat vote Liberal, pretty quiet about the Liberal that's campaigning in Edmonton Griesbach. As you note in your piece, these strategic voting campaigns reduce politics to not just a purely electoral equation, which is itself problematic, but one that is a binary, right? blue or red, Coke or Pepsi. You liken this to a single tree among the forest of possibilities. With the election campaign now coming to a close, how do you recommend people stay politically engaged outside of electoral politics?
Oh, I mean, yeah, like this is the least important thing that you can do in 4 years when it comes to doing politics, right? Like, yeah, we get to choose who our local representative is, and you're going to have a whole bunch of factors when you make that decision. And sometimes those factors are very strategic, and sometimes those factors are I hate that guy and I want to make sure he loses, and so I'll vote for anybody else, right? Like, voting is not as important as we're told that it is. Now, we're told that it's important because it de-emphasizes how important it is to do things like organizing our communities to fight for certain things, and fighting for certain things can look like a group of parents trying to change a small policy within a neighborhood, or it could also mean a whole city saying we don't want this huge development project, or we don't want that forest to be bulldozed or whatever. And so the election is a good moment to put the spotlight on politics for everybody, whereas, political junkies like us will be watching politics all the time. But everybody should be asking themselves, okay, what issue did I feel the most passionate about during this election? What treatment did it get in the election? And how can I influence a treatment that I believe it deserves, right? And you can do that to any issue. And for any issue, there's people that are already doing good work that you can get involved in, or maybe found something new or whatever. But politicians need to have you think that voting is the only thing that matters, so that you're not actually banging down their door on the rest of the 4 years that they're elected, or whatever long mandates will last for. I mean, maybe we'll get a minority tonight. That'll be interesting.
That would kind of be the best case scenario.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how that would work unless the NDP pull off something miraculous
Well, it'll be a block, probably balance of power, which would also be very good for Canada as well. But it could be so difficult politically to operationalize that it might just not work. And then we'll find ourselves in 8 months with Justin Trudeau coming back, just like his father did in 1980.
Yeah, that's what I'm pulling for. The Trudeau Renaissance.
Trudeau Renaissance.
Yeah, exactly. Could happen.
Yeah. Could happen.
Yeah, he's not running in Papineau,
No.
Is he?
No.
Right.
No, he's out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what he's up to right now.
Just probably shopping at Canadian Tire with his elbows up. Or visiting the Aga Khan, like whatever. The new Aga Khan? I don't know.
That's probably more likely. Though I don't know what report he has with the new Aga Khan.
I don't either.
Is there a new Aga Khan?
I have no idea.
They should make Chaka Khan the new Aga Khan. That's what I think.
Okay, wow. There's a statement.
All right, Nora, the book is Corporate Control, which comes out May 6th. You want to tell listeners how they can get a copy?
Yeah, any bookstore, including the worst ones that you know. So try to buy them at the best ones that you know. And if you don't have an independent bookstore in your neighborhood or your community, I mean, most of them deliver, so you can order online from any independent bookstore, or if you have to, you can get it at any of the corporate ones as well.
All right, great. Thanks so much for talking to me today, Nora, and I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.